I'm going to try and avoid the generic ASMR introduction, and instead I'll just toss up a title in the beginning of the video with my channel name. That way we can get right into it. So today I'm just going to be reading some passages from my favorite book, which is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I've read this book probably 6 or 7 times, if I'm being honest. I don't know, there's just something about it. Can't get away from it. So, let's just jump right in. Prologue. A silence of 3 parts. It was night again. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of 3 parts. The most obvious part was a hollow, echoing quiet made by things that were lacking. If there had been a wind, it would have sighed through the trees, set the inn sign creaking on its hooks, and brushed the silence down the road like trailing autumn leaves. If there had been a crowd, even a handful of men inside the inn, they would have filled the silence with conversation and laughter, the clatter and clamor one expects from a drinking house during the dark hours of night. If there had been music, but no, of course there was no music. In fact, there were none of these things, and so the silence remained. Inside the Waystone, a pair of men huddled at one corner of the bar. They drank with quiet determination, avoiding serious discussions of troubling news. In doing this, they added a small, sullen silence to the larger hollow one. It made an alloy of sorts, a counterpoint. The third silence was not an easy thing to notice. If you listened for an hour, you might begin to feel it in the wooden floor underfoot and in the rough, splintering barrels behind the bar. It was in the weight of the black stone hearth that held the heat of a long-dead fire. It was in the slow back and forth of a white linen cloth rubbing along the grain of the bar. And it was in the hands of the man who stood there, polishing a stretch of mahogany that already gleamed in the lamplight. The man had true red hair, red as flame. His eyes were dark and distant, and he moved with the subtle certainty that comes from knowing many things. The Waystone was his, just as the third silence was his. This was appropriate, as it was the greatest silence of the 3, wrapping the others inside itself. It was deep and wide as autumn's ending. It was heavy as a great river-smooth stone. It was the patient, cut-flower sound of a man who is waiting to die. Chapter 1. A Place for Demons. It was felling night, and the usual crowd had gathered at the Waystone Inn. 5 wasn't much of a crowd, but 5 was as many as the Waystone ever saw these days, times being what they were. Old Cobb was filling his role as storyteller and advice dispensary. The men at the bar sipped at their drinks and listened. In the back room, a young innkeeper stood out of sight behind the door, smiling as he listened to the details of a familiar story. When he awoke, Taberlin the Great found himself locked in a high tower. They had taken his sword and stripped him of his tools. Key, coin, and candle were all gone. But that weren't even the worst of it, you see. Cobb paused for effect, 'cause lamps on the wall were all burning blue. Graham, Jake, and Shep nodded to themselves. The three friends had grown up together, listening to Cobb's stories and ignoring his advice. Cobb peered closely at the newer, more attentive member of his small audience, the Smith's apprentice. Do you know what that meant, boy? Everyone called the Smith's apprentice boy, despite the fact that he was a hand taller than anyone there. Small towns being what they are, he would most likely remain boy until his beard fell out, or he bloodied someone's nose over the matter. The boy gave a slow nod. The Chandrian. That's right, Cobb said approvingly. The Chandrian. Everyone knows that blue fire is one of their signs. Now, but how'd they find him? The boy interrupted. And why didn't they kill him when they had the chance? Hush now. You'll get all the answers before the end, Jake said. Just let him tell it. No need for all that, Jake, Graham said. Boy's just curious. Drink your drink. I drank me drink already, Jake grumbled. I need another, but the innkeep's still skinning rats in the back room. He raised his voice and knocked his empty mug hollowly on top of the mahogany bar. Boy, we're thirsty men in here. The innkeeper appeared with 5 bowls of stew and 2 warm, round loaves of bread. He pulled more beer for Jake, Shep, and Old Cobb, moving with an air of bustling efficiency. The story was set aside while the men tended to their dinners. Old Cobb tucked away his bowl of stew with the predatory efficiency of a lifetime bachelor. The others were still blowing steam off their bowls when he finished the last of his loaf and returned to his story. Now Tamerlane needed to escape, but when he looked around, he saw a cell had no door, no windows. All around him was nothing but smooth, hard stone. It was a cell no man had ever escaped. But Tamerlane knew the name of all things, and so all things were his to command. He said to the stone, "Break," and the stone broke. The wall tore like a piece of paper, and through that hole, Tamerlane could see the sky and breathe the sweet spring air. He stepped to the edge, looked down, and without a second thought, he stepped out into the open air. The boy's eyes went wide. He didn't. Cobb nodded seriously. So Tamerlane fell, but he did not despair, for he knew the name of the wind, and so the wind obeyed him. He spoke to the wind, and it cradled and caressed him. It bore him to the ground as gently as a puff of thistledown, and set him down on his feet, softly as a mother's kiss. And when he got to the ground and felt his side where they'd stabbed him, he saw that it weren't hardly a scratch. Now, maybe it was just a piece of luck. Cobb tapped the side of his nose knowingly, or maybe it had something to do with the amulet he was wearing under his shirt. What amulet? The boy asked eagerly, through a mouthful of stew. Old Cobb leaned back on his stool, glad for the chance to elaborate. A few days earlier, Tamerlane had met a tinker on the road, and even though Tamerlane didn't have much to eat, he shared his dinner with the old man. Right sensible thing to do, Graham said quietly to the boy. Everyone knows a tinker pays for kindness twice. No, Jake grumbled. Get it right. A tinker's advice pays kindness twice. The innkeeper spoke up for the first time that night. Actually, you're missing more than half, he said, standing in the doorway behind the bar. A tinker's debt is always paid, once for any simple trade, twice for freely given Not that you could expect anything else, really. He'd only been in town for a year or so. He was still a stranger. The smith's apprentice had lived here since he was 11, and he was still referred to as that Ranish boy, as if Ranish was some foreign country and not a town less than 30 miles away. Just something I heard once, Coat said to fill the silence, obviously embarrassed. Old Cobb nodded before he cleared his throat and launched back into the story. Now, this amulet was worth a whole bucket of gold royals, but on account of Taberlin's kindness, the tinker sold it to him for nothing but an iron penny, a copper penny, and a silver penny. It was black as a winter night, and cold as ice to touch, but so long as it was round his neck, Taberlin would be safe from the harm of evil things, demons and such. I'd give a good piece for such a thing these days, Shep said darkly. He had drunk the most and talked the least over the course of the evening. Everyone knew that something bad had happened out on his farm last Sindley night, but since they were good friends, they knew better than to press him for the details, at least not at this early in the evening, not as sober as they were. Who wouldn't? Old Cobb said judiciously, taking a long drink. I didn't know the Chandrian were demons, the boy said. I'd heard. They ain't demons, Jake said firmly. They were the first 6 people to refuse Delu's choice of the path, and he cursed them to wander the corners. Are you telling this story, Jacob Walker? Cobb said sharply. 'Cause if you are, I'll just let you get on with it. The 2 men glared at each other for a long moment. Eventually, Jake looked away, muttering something that could, conceivably, have been an apology. Cobb turned back to the boy. That's the mystery of the Chandrian, he said. Where do they come from? Where do they go after they've done their bloody deeds? Are they men who sold their souls? Demons? Spirits? No one knows. Cobb shot Jake a profoundly disdainful look, though every half-wit claims he knows. The story fell further into bickering at this point about the nature of the Chandrian, the signs that showed their presence to the wary, and whether the amulet would protect Taberlin from bandits, or mad dogs, or falling off a horse. Things were getting heated when the front door banged open. Stanchion came ambling back to his spot at the bar. I'll go next, sir, if it's all right with you. I hoped I didn't look as nervous as I felt. My grip on the loot case was slippery from my sweating palms. He smiled at me and nodded. You've got a good eye for a crowd, boy. This one's ripe for a sad song. Still planning on doing Savian? I nodded. He sat down and took a drink. Well then, let's just give them a couple minutes to simmer and get their talking over with. I nodded and leaned against the bar. I took the time to fret uselessly about things I had no control over. One of the pegs on my lute was loose, and I didn't have the money to fix it. It seemed only a short time before Stanchion stood and raised a questioning eyebrow at me. I nodded and picked up my loot case. It suddenly looked terribly shabby to me. Together, we walked up the stairs. As soon as my foot touched the stage, the room hushed to a murmur. At the same time, my nervousness left me, burned away by the attention of the crowd. It has always been that way with me. Off stage, I worry and sweat. On stage, I am calm as a windless winter night. Stanchion bade everyone consider me as a candidate His words had a soothing, ritual feel. When he gestured to me, there was no familiar applause, only an expectant silence. In a flash, I saw myself as the audience must see me, not finely dressed as the others had been. In fact, only one step from being ragged. Young, almost a child. I could feel their curiosity drawing them closer to me. I let it build, taking my time as I unclasped my battered second-hand loot case. I have to sneeze. And removed my battered second-hand loot. I felt their attention sharpen at the homely sight of it. I struck a few quiet chords, then touched the pegs, tuning it ever so slightly. I fingered a few more light chords, testing, listened, and nodded to myself. The light shining onto the stage made the rest of the room dim from where I sat. Looking out, I saw what seemed to be 1,000 eyes. Simon and Willem, Stanchion by the bar, Dioch by the door. I felt a vague flutter in my stomach as I saw Ambrose watching me with all the menace of a smoldering coal. I looked away from him to see a bearded man in red, Count Threep, an old couple holding hands, a lovely dark-eyed girl. My audience. I smiled at them. The smile drew them closer still, and I sang. In the beginning, I was almost like an automaton, thoughtlessly performing the actions that would keep me alive. I ate the second rabbit I caught, and the third. I found a patch of wild strawberries. I dug for roots. By the end of the fourth day, I had everything I needed to survive. A stone-lined fire pit, a shelter for my loot. I had even assembled a small stockpile of foodstuffs that I could fall back on in case of emergency. I also had one thing I did not need: time. After I had taken care of immediate needs, I found I had nothing to do. I think this is when a small part of my mind started to slowly reawaken itself. Make no mistake, I was not myself. At least, I was not the same person I had been a span of days before. Everything I did, I attended to with my whole mind, leaving no part of me free for remembering. I grew thinner and more ragged. I slept in rain or sun, on soft grass, moist earth, or sharp stones, with an intensity of indifference that only grief can promote. The only notice I took of my surroundings was when it rained, because then I could not bring out my lute to play, and that pained me. Of course I played. It was my only solace. By the end of the first month, my fingers had calluses hard as stones, and I could play for hours upon hours. I played and played again all of the songs I knew from memory. Then I played the half-remembered songs as well, filling in the forgotten parts as best I could. Eventually, I could play from when I woke until the time I slept. I stopped playing the songs I knew and started inventing new ones. I had made up songs before. I had even helped my father compose a verse or two, but now I gave it my whole attention. Some of those songs have stayed with me to this day. Soon after that, I began playing. How can I describe it? I began to play something other than songs. When the sun warms the grass and the breeze cools you, it feels a certain way. I would play until I got the feeling right. I would play until it sounded like warm grass and cool breeze. I was only playing for myself, but I was a harsh audience. I remember spending nearly 3 whole days trying to capture wind turning a leaf. By the end of the second month, I could play things nearly as easily as I saw and felt them. Sun setting behind the clouds, bird taking a drink, dew in the bracken. Somewhere in the third month, I stopped looking outside and started looking inside for things to play. I learned to play riding in the wagon with Ben, singing with Father by the fire, watching Shandy dance, grinding leaves when it's nice outside, Mother smiling,